Have you ever lived in a neighborhood where one person acts like they own everything? They make all the rules, hand out punishments, and treat everyone else like they're beneath them? That was life for me, Emily Carter, in a quiet suburban neighborhood that should have been peaceful, except for our HOA president, Richard. At first, Richard seemed like just another neighbor. He kept his lawn neat, waved politely when he walked his dog, and even hosted summer barbecues. But once he became president of our HOA, something changed. It wasn't long before people started calling him the dictator. Richard had rules for everything, and I mean everything. If your trash cans weren't rolled in by 9 a.m. sharp the morning after pickup, you got a fine. If your grass was half an inch too long, fine. If your kid left a bike leaning against the garage door, fine. One time, he even fined an elderly woman named Mrs. Turner because she had too many garden gnomes in her yard. Can you imagine? Gnomes. He claimed it was all about protecting property values. But really, it was about power. And he loved holding it over us. I'll never forget the first time he came after me. It was a Saturday morning, and I had just gotten back from grocery shopping. My car was parked in my driveway with the trunk open as I carried in bags. I was inside for maybe 5 minutes. When I came back out, Richard was standing there with his little clipboard, writing me up for obstructing the driveway. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but he handed me a fine slip with a $75 penalty. I said, "Richard, I was unloading groceries. 5 minutes." He smiled and said, "Rules are rules, Emily. If I let you slide, I'd have to let everyone slide." Then he strutted away like he'd just saved the neighborhood. That's when I realized Richard wasn't just strict. He was a bully, and bullies like him, they never stop until someone stands up to them. But at the time, I felt stuck. Most of us did. Moving wasn't an option, and fighting him just meant more fines. So we kept our heads down and tried not to get noticed. Until one day, I noticed something that made my blood boil. It started small. I was out for a jog when I passed by the community pool. The gates were locked, and a big sign read, "Closed for maintenance until further notice." That didn't surprise me. The pool had been closed for months. Richard always said the HOA didn't have enough funds for repairs. But then, later that same day, I saw something odd. Richard was unloading several cases of expensive wine from his SUV. I glanced closer and noticed the label. Each bottle was worth at least $40. I thought, that's strange. Where's he getting the money for that? A week later, I noticed again, this time, Richard at a fancy steakhouse downtown. I was there with a friend for happy hour, and across the restaurant, there he was, laughing loudly, waving his HOA card at the waiter as he signed the bill. That's when a thought hit me like a lightning bolt. What if Richard wasn't just bossy? What if he was stealing from us? I started paying more attention. At HOA meetings, he always brushed off questions about the budget. "Repairs are too expensive," he'd say. Or, "We need to raise dues to cover costs." But the pool stayed closed. The park swing stayed broken. The sidewalk stayed cracked. Yet Richard's life seemed to get nicer. New electronics in his house. Weekend getaways. Expensive wine. It didn't add up. So one night, after another frustrating HOA meeting where Richard announced a new round of fines and another increase in dues, I went home and vented to my friend Maria. Maria's lived in the neighborhood for years, and she's an accountant, the kind of person who notices when numbers don't line up. I told her everything I'd seen. The wine, the steakhouse, the vague excuses about money. She sat back, arms crossed, and said, "Emily, I think you're onto something. If he's using HOA funds for personal stuff, that's embezzlement." The word hit me like thunder. Embezzlement. Richard wasn't just annoying. He might actually be a criminal. But suspicion wasn't enough. If we wanted to stop him, we needed proof. Maria leaned forward and said, "I can help. I know how to read financial statements. If we can get access to the HOA records, I bet we'll find something." My stomach flipped. This was big, risky, But deep down, I knew Maria was right. Richard had been pushing people around for years. Someone had to stop him. And maybe, just maybe, that someone was me. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made up my mind. Richard thought he was untouchable, but I was going to bring him down. What would you do if your HOA president was stealing money from your neighborhood? Would you risk going after them, or would you just keep quiet? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more revenge stories. The morning after I made my decision, I walked into the community center with my heart racing. It was the place where Richard stored all the HOA files, and he loved to brag that everything was in perfect order. I wasn't sure how I was going to pull this off, but I knew one thing: if I wanted to take him down, I had to start with the money. Luckily, Maria had a plan. Emily, she told me over coffee that morning, HOA records are supposed to be available to any member who requests them. By law, you have the right to see where your dues are going. I blinked. Wait, you mean he has to show us the books if we ask? She nodded. Exactly. He might try to wiggle out of it, but legally, he can't refuse. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be as impossible as it seemed. That evening, I typed up a formal request for the HOA financial records. I made 3 copies, one for Richard, one for the board, and one for myself. The next day, I walked straight up to Richard's house and rang the bell. He opened the door wearing a silk robe, holding a wine glass, even though it was barely new. His expression soured the moment he saw me. "What do you want, Emily?" he snapped. I smiled sweetly and handed him the letter. "I'd like to review the HOA financial statements for the past 3 years. His face turned red. He stammered, "WHY? That's none of your business." "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "it is. Homeowners have the right to review them. It's in the bylaws." He clenched his jaw. For a second, I thought he might slam the door in my face, but instead, he snapped the paper and growled, "Fine, I'll get back to you." 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of silence. No records. No calls. Not even a fake excuse. That's when Maria said, "We're going to have to push harder." So we did. We sent a certified letter to the entire HOA board. This time, there was no ignoring us. Reluctantly, Richard called and said the files would be available for review the following Tuesday. When Maria and I showed up, Richard was already there, arms crossed, glaring at us like we were. He plopped 3 duster binders onto the table. "There, knock yourselves out." Then he sat in the corner, sipping coffee, watching us like a hawk. I think he thought the paperwork would be too boring or too complicated for us to understand. But he underestimated Maria. Maria flipped through the binders like she was reading a children's book. Her eyes scanned each page with razor focus. "Look here," she whispered, pointing to a receipt for maintenance supplies totaling $1,200, but the vendor name is a liquor store. My jaw dropped. "And hey, $3, $500 for equipment repairs." But the check was written to an electronics store. Page after page, we uncovered more. Spa packages, high-end restaurants, even a flat-screen TV, all listed under neighborhood expenses. I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was theft. Richard tried to act casual, leaning back in his chair. "Those are business dinners, networking. It's all legitimate." Maria looked up, eyebrow raised. "At a spa? With aromatherapy massages?" The corner of his mouth twitched. I could see the cracks forming. We spent hours combing through the records. By the time we left, we had copied dozens of suspicious receipts and statements. Maria scanned them into her laptop, backing them up 3 different ways. As we walked to the car, she whispered, "Emily, this is worse than I thought. He's stolen at least $20,000, maybe more." My hands were shaking, partly from anger, partly from excitement. We finally had proof, but we weren't done yet, Maria said. "We need more." 2 weeks, I became part-time detective. I started casually walking my dog past Richard's house at odd hours. Sometimes I'd see delivery drivers carrying in cases of wine. Sometimes I'd spot brand new packages stacked on his porch, expensive stuff I knew wasn't coming out of his own pocket. Once, I even saw him unloading a brand new flat-screen TV from his car. I snapped a picture with my phone, heart pounding. Each time, I documented everything. Dates, times, photos. Maria took it a step further. She compared the receipts from the HOA binder to Richard's social media posts. And wouldn't you know it, on the exact date the HOA paid for a community event dinner, Richard had posted a photo of himself enjoying a filet mignon at a steakhouse. Another day, the HOA supposedly paid for pool maintenance. But instead of fixing the pool, Richard had checked in at a spa 2 towns over. The evidence lined up perfectly. By the end of the month, we had a mountain of proof. Receipts, bank statements, photos, witness accounts. Richard wasn't just dipping into the HOA fund. He was treating it like his personal piggy bank. And the total amount, over $80,000. One evening, as Maria and I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by stacks of papers and open laptops, she leaned back and said, "Emily, this is it. This is enough to take him down." I stared at the pile of evidence, my heart pounding. For the first time, I felt real power in my hands. Richard had bullied us for years, but now I had the power to destroy him. But we couldn't just dump the evidence quietly. If we went to the police right away, Richard might find a way to spin it, maybe even hide behind lawyers. No, we needed to expose him publicly, in front of the whole neighborhood. We needed to make sure everyone saw him for who he really was. That's when the idea hit me. The next HOA meeting, everyone would be there. The board, the neighbors, Richard himself. If I revealed everything then, he wouldn't be able to squirm out of it. It would be his public downfall. Maria grinned when I told her the plan. "I like it, but you need to be ready. He's going to fight back." I nodded. Let him. The evidence speaks for itself. I gathered the receipts, printed copies for the board, and organized photos into a slideshow. I even practiced what I would say, rehearsing in front of my bathroom mirror until I could deliver it without my voice shaking. Richard had humiliated me once over a $75 fine. Now, I was about to humiliate him in front of the entire neighborhood. If you caught your HOA president stealing thousands of dollars, would you risk exposing them in front of the whole community? Or would you take the safe route and just report it quietly? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The night of the HOA meeting, I felt like my stomach was tied in knots. I had rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times, but the closer it got, the more my hands shook. What if Richard twisted everything? What if the board turned against me? What if the neighbors didn't believe me? Then I remembered every unfair fine, every smug smack, every dollar he stole from us. And suddenly, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was ready. The community center buzzed with chatter as neighbors filed in. You could feel the tension in the air. Nobody liked Richard, but he held so much power, most people were afraid to speak up. At the front of the room, Richard sat at the long table with his gavel, flanked by a few board members. He looked calm, smug, like he always did. His suit was crisp, his hair slicked back. When he saw me, he smirked. "Evening, Emily. Here to complain about your trash cans again." I smiled politely. "No, Richard. I'm here to talk about something much bigger." The meeting began like always. Richard cleared his throat and droned on about fines, dues, and protecting property values. He waved a stack of papers in the air. "As you can see, expenses are rising. I propose we raise dues again by 10%. The room groaned. People whispered angrily, but no one challenged him. And that's when I stood up. "Excuse me," I said loudly, my voice carrying across the room. "Before we vote on raising dues, I think the neighborhood deserves to know how our money is really being spent." The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. Richard froze. Emily, sit down. This isn't the time. I took a deep breath. No, Richard, this is exactly the time. I held up a folder thick with papers. For months, I've been looking into the HOA finances, and what I found is shocking. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard barked a laugh. Oh, please. What conspiracy theory are you peddling now? Everyone knows you don't like me. This is just another attempt to embarrass me. I stepped forward, handing copies of receipts to the board members and a few neighbors in the front row. Take a look. Thousands of dollars charged to the HOA account. Not for repairs, not for improvements, but for Richard's personal luxuries. Wine, spa weekends, steakhouse dinners, even electronics for his house. The neighbors leaned in, flipping through the papers. Their eyes widened, their jaws dropped. One man muttered, "Oh my God." A woman whispered, "He's been stealing from us." Richard slammed his gavel. "These are fake. She made them up." But Maria stood up beside me, her voice clear and firm. "Actually, I'm an accountant. I verified every single number. These receipts match the bank statements exactly. This is real." The room erupted with voices. "You fined me for leaving my trash can out while you were buying wine with our money. Our pool's been closed for years, and this is where the money went. I've been paying extra dues so he can eat steak." The noise grew louder, angrier. Richard's face turned red. He slammed the gavel again. "Order! I demand order!" But no one was listening anymore. The neighbors were furious, and that's when I pulled out the final piece of evidence. I connected my phone to the projector. The screen lit up with a photo, Richard unloading cases of wine from his SUV. Then another photo, Richard at a steakhouse, HOA card in hand, signing the bill. The room gasped. People pointed, whispering. I raised my voice over the noise. "Here's your HOA president, spending our money on himself, while our sidewalks crumble, while the pool stays closed, while our neighborhood suffers." The room erupted. Richard shot to his feet. "This is slander. You can't prove I took that money for myself." Maria held up the bank statements. "Actually, you can. Every dollar was transferred into Richard's personal account before being spent. That's not just dishonest, it's embezzlement." The word hit the room like thunder. Embezzlement. People gasped. The board members exchanged shocked looks. One of them, Mr. Lang, who usually supported Richard, stood up slowly. His voice shook. "Richard, is this true?" Richard sputtered. No. It's a misunderstanding. Temporary borrowing. That's all." But it was too late. Neighbors were on their feet now, shouting, "You thief! You've been robbing us for years. Step down." The chant grew louder. "Step down! Step down!" Richard's face was beet red, sweat pouring down his forehead. He slammed the gavel one last time, then threw it down in frustration. "You'll regret this," he shouted, storming out of the room. But the truth was clear. He was finished. As the door slammed behind him, the board members sat in stunned silence. Finally, Mr. Lang spoke up. "We need to hold an emergency vote right now. Richard is hereby removed as HOA president." The room cheered. People clapped, hugged, even cried. For the first time in years, I felt free. And I stood there, heart pounding, realizing I had just pulled off what no one thought was possible. I had taken down Richard. If you were at that meeting, would you have stood up and cheered, or stayed quiet in the back? Let me know in the comments. And make sure to like and subscribe. The night of the HOA meeting felt like a dream. Neighbors were clapping me on the back, thanking me, calling me brave. For years, we had all lived under Richard's thumb, scared of his fines, his rules, his smug little smoke. But now, the mask had been ripped off. Everyone finally saw him for what he really was, a thief. Still, I knew the fight wasn't over. Getting him removed was just the first step. Now it was time for real justice. The very filed a formal complaint with the county office. We handed over everything: receipts, bank statements, photos, timelines. The clerk at the counter flipped through the papers, eyebrows climbing higher with each page. "Wow," she muttered. "This is a lot." "It's theft," Maria said firmly, "from every single homeowner in our neighborhood." The clerk nodded. "Don't worry, we'll be in touch." For weeks, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Some people were angry, some were thrilled, and some just couldn't believe it had finally happened. Every time I walked my dog, neighbors stopped me to talk. "You were so brave, Emily. Thank you for standing up to him. You saved us all." I wasn't used to the attention, but I won't lie, it felt good. For once, I wasn't just the woman getting fined for unloading groceries. I was the woman who brought down the tyrant. And then, one afternoon, it happened. Police cars pulled into Richard's driveway. Neighbors peeked through blinds and gathered in small groups outside. We all watched as Richard was let out in handcuffs. His face was pale, his hair messy, his expensive shirt wrinkled. Gone was the smug, untouchable king of the neighborhood. In his place was just a man, a scared, angry man who'd been caught. He shouted something about false accusations and setups, but no one believed him anymore. I stood at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, and for the first time in years, I smiled at him. He looked away. The news spread fast. Richard had stolen over $80,000 from the HOA over the years. He had written checks to himself, disguised purchases as maintenance, and used our money like his personal credit card. The prosecutors didn't take long to build a case. The evidence Maria and I had collected was airtight. At the trial, he tried to act confident, but the jury didn't buy it. Within days, he was convicted of embezzlement and sentenced to probation, community service, and full restitution. He was forced to pay back every single dollar. Meanwhile, the HOA board scrambled to fix the damage he'd left behind. They appointed a new treasurer, someone actually trustworthy, and for the first time in years, the HOA funds went where they were supposed to. The pool was repaired and reopened, just in time for summer. The park got brand new swings and slides for the kids. The cracked sidewalks were fixed, making the neighborhood safer for everyone. And here's the best part. With Richard gone, the board voted to lower dues. For once, we weren't paying for his vacations. We were paying for our community. Life in the neighborhood changed. People smiled more. Kids played outside again. Neighbors who had avoided each other out of fear of Richard's wrath now chatted in driveways and shared barbecues. It felt like a weight had been lifted, and everywhere I went, people thanked me. Mrs. Tyner brought me homemade cookies. The Johnsons invited me to their backyard cookout. Even quiet old Mr. Hayes, who barely said 2 words to anyone, stopped me one evening and said, "You did good, kid." As for Richard, he lost everything. His reputation, his position, his little kingdom of power. I heard through the grapevine that he had to sell his house to pay restitution. The same house where he once fined people for their lawn height now sat empty. A for sale sign swaying in the wind. The sight of that sign made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. One evening, Maria and I sat by the newly reopened pool, sipping iced tea and watching the kids splash around. She turned to me and said, "You realize you're kind of a hero now, right?" I laughed. "A hero? Me? You stood up to him when no one else would," she said. "And you won. That's not nothing." I thought about that for a while. For so long, I had felt powerless under Richard's rules. But now, I realized something important. Bullies only stay in power when people are too scared to fight back. And sometimes, it just takes one person to say, "Enough." As the sun set over the neighborhood, I felt proud, not just for myself, but for everyone who had finally found their voices. Richard thought he could silence us forever, but in the end, his greed silenced him. And me? I learned that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't yelling or fighting back. It's watching the bully lose everything, and knowing you were the one who made it happen. If you were Emily, forget to subscribe.